In today's video, we're going to talk about 5 ways complex trauma can look like adult autism and why getting this right actually matters. Now, let me start with something I see all the time. An adult comes into my office or writes me online and says something like, I think I might be autistic, I struggle socially, I feel overwhelmed easily, I shut down under stress, I've always felt different, and so on. Now, here's the part that really matters. They're not wrong to ask that question or those questions. But sometimes, not always, but sometimes, what they're really dealing with is complex trauma, not autism. I've lost track of the number of times that there's actually trauma going on, not so much ASD. Now, here's why this conversation matters so much. If you treat trauma like autism, you can accidentally normalize suffering that actually needs healing. And if you treat autism like trauma, you can accidentally pathologize a nervous system that simply works differently. So today, I have to walk you through 5 ways that complex trauma, also referred to as cptsd, can look a lot like adult autism, especially on the surface. Now, this is not about self-diagnosing, it's not about labeling yourself, and it's definitely not about dismissing autism. It's about clarity, because clarity changes what actually helps. Now, here's one quick important note before we begin. You can be autistic and have complex trauma, okay? They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. But what we're doing here is learning how to separate traits from adaptations and wiring from wounding. Okay, let's start with number 1. Let's talk about social withdrawal and feeling different. One of the most common reasons adults suspect autism is this deep sense of, I don't fit in, I feel separate, I don't know the rules. Now, in autism, this often comes from neurological differences in social processing. But in complex trauma, social withdrawal usually develops for a different reason. In trauma, withdrawal is often protective. If you grew up in an environment where people were unpredictable, emotional expression was punished, and safety depended on reading the room perfectly, your nervous system learned something very early. Connection is dangerous. So you didn't fail at socializing, you adapted by minimizing exposure. And over time, that adaptation can look like awkwardness, overthinking conversations, avoidance of groups, feeling like you're behind socially. But the root isn't a missing social instinct. It's a nervous system that learned safety through distance. Now here's the key distinction. Autism is about difference. Complex trauma is about defense. And defenses can soften when safety increases. Now let's talk about sensory sensitivity and overwhelm. Another huge overlap is sensory overwhelm. Bright lights, loud noises, crowded spaces, too much input, and so on. Now, in autism, sensory sensitivity is often hardwired. The nervous system processes stimulation more intensely, period. But in complex trauma, sensory sensitivity is usually threat-based. When someone has lived for years in fight or flight, their nervous system stays tuned to danger. That could mean sounds feel sharper, movements feel intrusive, environments feel chaotic, the body never fully settles. Now, this isn't because the brain is wired differently. It's because the threat detection system never got to stand down. So the body reacts to neutral stimulation as if it's a threat. Now here's a coaching insight I want you to hear. Listen, trauma makes the world feel loud because the volume knob on safety is broken. And that's very different from a brain that was always wired to receive input intensely. Now let's talk about emotional shutdown and flat affect. Many adults say, people tell me I seem flat, or I don't show much emotion, or I shut down instead of reacting. Okay, well this can look like autism from the outside. But in trauma, emotional shutdown is often freeze, not lack of feeling. If expressing emotion once led to criticism, dismissal, escalation, punishment, your nervous system learned feeling is unsafe. So emotions didn't disappear, they went underground. Now, what trauma survivors often experience isn't emotional absence. No, it's emotional inaccessibility. The feelings are there, but the pathway to express them is blocked. And here's the big difference. In autism, emotional expression may be different, but in trauma, emotional expression was often shut down to survive. Now, that distinction matters when choosing treatment. That's the big message here. Now let's talk about rigid thinking and the need for control. Another overlap is rigidity. Strong routines, discomfort with change, black and white thinking, and so on. Now in autism, structure often helps regulate a nervous system that thrives on predictability. But in complex trauma, rigidity is often about control after chaos. If your early life was unpredictable, emotionally, relationally, or physically, your system learned, if I control the environment, I reduce danger. So routines become safety. Certainty becomes safety. Rules become safety. The rigidity isn't preference, it's prevention. And that's why trauma-based rigidity often loosens as safety increases, while autistic structure remains supportive even in safe environments. Now let's talk about masking, people-pleasing, and identity confusion. This one is subtle and incredibly important, so listen up. Both autistic adults and trauma survivors often talk about masking, but the why is way different. In autism, masking is often about learning social behaviors that don't come intuitively. In complex trauma, masking is about staying emotionally safe. So if you learned early that being yourself leads to rejection, needs cause conflict, authenticity is not tolerated by other people, I can't be myself, you become a shape shifter, not because you lacked identity, but because identity wasn't safe. And over time, this can create exhaustion, identity confusion, chronic self-doubt, a sense of being hollow. Here's the coaching reframe. Listen, trauma doesn't erase the self. It hides it until safety returns. Now let's talk about why this distinction actually matters. Why am I making such a big deal about this? Okay, because the wrong explanation leads to the wrong help. If someone with trauma is told, well, this is just how you are, they may stop seeking healing that is actually possible. And if someone with autism is told, well, this is trauma, you need to fix it, they may spend years trying to change something that doesn't need fixing. So clarity creates compassion for yourself and others. Now let me leave you with this. You're not broken because you struggle. You're not defective because things feel hard. And you're not too much or not enough for asking the right questions. Whether you're exploring autism, trauma, or both, what matters most is this. Understanding why your nervous system does what it does is the first step toward giving it what it actually needs. Now, if this video resonated with you, you're not alone, you're not too late, you're just in the process of learning, and that's fine. If you'd like more videos that explore the overlap between trauma, neurodiversity, and emotional healing, make sure to subscribe. Also comment. I read and respond to all comments. What has been your experience? I'll see you in the next video. Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you.